Hey, everybody. Welcome to season 3 of Just Getting Started right here on the Cumulus Podcast Network. I am your humble host, Rich Eisen. Seasons 1 and 2 in the books. It's been a fun podcast that I just got started back at the height of the pandemic when life was completely upside down. And I figured, you know what, why not start a podcast in which the guests come on and tell their stories, their origin stories about how they just got started and whatever they do for a living, or if they changed professional horses midstream at any point in time, how they did that, why they did that, what sort of pitfalls they overcame, just so maybe you can have something portable in your lives to just get started on something new or just get started on plowing through this crazy ass world of ours. And the first season was a total blast. You can go check out the first season of it, where I kind of plumbed the depths of my guest Rolodex and got some folks to tell their stories from all over the map, from my buddy Pat McAfee to the novelist Harlan Coben. Dr. Anthony Fauci told his origin story and how he just got started, the actress Juliana Margulies. And then last year, for season 2, it wrapped up with the voices of the NFL, 10 of my colleagues in the NFL who call games for a living or do what I do for a living, talking about the NFL every single day, and Al Michaels and Jim Nantz and Joe Buck. Amy Trask, the longtime executive of the Raiders, now with CBS, my buddy Adam Schefter, so on and so forth, told all of their origin stories. And now it's time for season 3. And my first guest of season 3 happens to be the new host of this podcast, who's going to be hosting this podcast from this moment on. And she is a longtime broadcaster in the sports world. And I know her extremely well because I've been married to her for 19 years, and she is the mother of our 3 beautiful children, Suzy Shuster. Hi, Suze. How are you?
Minnie. I don't know if you can see, but in the background, every so often are 3 dogs. Well, 2 plus my mother's dog.
Yes.
Are trying to let themselves into my office. So bear with me. There may be some intermittent barking going on, but you know, what can you do when one tries to juggle as one does? Taking over, just getting started.
Well, you know what? I think fans of this podcast might have heard barking dogs in the background every now and then. Our erstwhile producer, Major Domo Lou Pellegrino, and might have been making sure that the dogs don't make air. So if anybody wonders who let the dogs out, it's the people who let them in. So I think a great way to maybe start this, hon, is to tell how you got started. Because, I mean, part of this pod over the last 2 years is me mixing in my stories of my origin stories of how I got started in the business. And you've got one of the most unique stories of how you got started from talking your way into a job in the number 2 media market in the United States in Los Angeles, and who kind of inspired you to do it. So I know the story, and I figured you should tell it here on this app to launch.
You know, it's funny, as we're talking here, I'm thinking I'm actually just getting started on this too, because I'm in a midlife renaissance as well. So maybe I am the right person to take over this podcast. But I got started in broadcast journalism my senior year in college. I went to school in New York City, and there was an ad up for an intern at CBS Sports. At the time, I was planning on going to study British history, maybe have a career in art history, but I grew up in Boston. My brother Scott, obsessed with all things sports, as one is wont to do in Boston. They throw you out if you don't love sports. And so I actually talked my way into an internship at CBS Sports. I snuck past the security guard at BlackRock. A great guy. It's true. I actually said I was going to the 11th floor, and a great guy.
Oh, I know it's true. I've seen you do stuff like this in many different countries around the world, Suze. I mean,
I got a job as a researcher. They told me if I could pay my way to Charlotte, I could be an intern for the Final Four. And I remember I had to write down the starting five of the Arizona. It was Arizona too. It was Arizona, Arkansas. God, who was it? 94. Arizona, Arkansas. Somebody
I'll
else.
look it up.
Whatever.
You could take care of that's what I've got the Google. You've got the story. Keep going.
I had to call my brother and write down the starting five of the Arkansas Razorbacks on a Delta napkin. So I knew who was playing. Corliss Williamson was one of the players. You don't forget that name or that face. And there's no one Richardson, of course. So I went from that one. I had that internship. I went there. I stayed at a friend's of my mom's house that I didn't even know. Turns out I really didn't have an internship. That Brent, my boss, just wanted me to hang out with him. And so at one point, I was sitting around all weekend doing nothing. At one point, they said, "You want to take a camera around and look for celebrities in the crowd?" I spotted Sandy Koufax. I said, "Hey guys, I've got Sandy Koufax." They said, "Well, how do you know who he is?" I said, "Of course I do. It's Sandy Koufax." And that gave them a little bit more confidence in me to do more over the weekend. Leslie Visser took me under her wing. I still have a photograph of her with me wearing one of her ubiquitous red jackets. And she gave me great advice. She gave me her cell phone number. And Leslie Visser helped me get going. She actually got me in touch with, after my first job, I was looking to get back into sports, period, because I couldn't get a job in sports out of college. I worked in news for a couple of years. She put me in touch with Vince Doria, her old Boston Globe friend at ESPN, and he hired me as an associate producer at ESPN because they wanted someone with a news background, not just some junkie. At the time, I don't know if people have heard about this, but when you got interviewed for even a production assistant job, it was normally by John Walsh, if you remember John Walsh.
Yeah, the grandfather of SportsCenter. Yeah.
And he would quiz you. He'd give you five questions, esoteric questions about sports. Who was the starting five of the 78 Celtics, you name it. So I walked in, I shook his hand. I said, "Look, if you're going to ask me questions, let's just stop now. I won't know the answer. But if you give me this job, I guarantee you not only will I find out the answer faster than anybody else, but I'll also book them all for a show within an hour." He's like, "Okay, you're hired." I did ESPN for a couple of years, met you.
Well, hold on a second. Wait a minute. Hold on. So that I'd never heard before. Because, you know, when I got the call in Redding, California, pretty much a few months before this whole thing happened with you. And by the way, the Final Four that year was Arkansas, Duke, Arizona, and Florida. So your memory served you right for half.
Right?
Right. And so, you know, Corliss Williamson was the most outstanding player. Yeah, the 40 minutes of hell that we have seen our son Cooper unleash in his fifth grade basketball game the other day. But I remember when I was in Redding, California, and they called me, ESPN called me up, and I've told that story back in season 2 when I got the phone call at work and for my local TV. So I knew I would have to go and audition. I had heard the same thing that you had heard, that they quiz you, that they give you like a quiz, like the movie Diner, you know, in the basement, where you need to pass that quiz. And if you do, then you can get married to basically ESPN, you know? And so I was deathly afraid of that. And I had on my mirror in my bathroom in the small, you know, one bedroom that I had in Redding, I taped to my mirror all the trophies that the NHL gives out at the end of the season, because the hockey was my Achilles heel, you know?
Sure.
So like the Vezina trophies for the best, you know, goalie, and the Hart Trophy, and the Lady Byng for sportsmanship and whatever. And I had them, and every single day when I shaved and, you know, exfoliated, as I'm in front of the mirror, and for those listening, Suzy gave me a look there. So I would study it, but when it came down to it, they never quizzed me. I never got the quiz. I just got the audition, which scared the hell out of me. But I love the fact that you basically said, "Don't even quiz me, I'll get it wrong. But you hire me, I'll get everything else right." I'd never heard that before.
I'm doing your show tomorrow, and if someone were to say to me, I need the starting five of the Sixers stat, I'd say Joel Embiid, and I study. That's how I do.
Well, now
things.
you know it's
I
hard.
study,
Now.
Well, now I know.
Right.
I mean, that's helpful.
Right.
But he's not playing.
Not yet.
Right. Not yet. Anyway, my point is that I'm different than the normal sports reporter. I approach it differently. Anyway, I'm not a thesaurus. My brother's a thesaurus of information. I'm not that way. Sally Jenkins, the esteemed Washington Post reporter, once said men and women learn about sports differently and care about sports differently. Men care about down and distance. Women care about how hot the field was when Corey Stringer died. I'm in that area. I love the stories. I love the guys playing. I like and the women playing. I love.
I've seen you care about. I've seen you care about down and distance too. I've seen you care about.
Well, I mean, if it's the Patriots,
right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an idiot. But but like for instance, I think I just lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. Thank you for that. Wait a minute. What was it?
You were just. I interrupted you when you were getting to the part about working on Sunday morning Sports Center, and that's when I met you because I was working on the nightly Sports Center, and you were there for how long was it before you?
1 year and 9 months exactly that I was in Bristol, Connecticut.
You kind of were not one and done, but and you were driving back and forth from New York City because you didn't really want to live up there in central Connecticut like the rest of us who were, kind of enclosed in that social life. But so then you went from there to Real Sports, and that's where you had this big moment for your career where you realized producing isn't really what you wanted to do anymore. And I love this story.
Well, ironically, it was at ESPN. I had found I was researching a story on Marshall on the plane crash,
right?
And I was doing it for SportsCenter, and I found the only man who didn't get on the plane the night that the plane crashed and exploded in the field outside of Huntington, West Virginia. To make a long story short, I flew down to Huntington, West Virginia. I convinced this gentleman who had never spoken. He was so heartbroken, so disconsolate after he had made a decision not to get on the plane crash. He went to go visit some family. The plane took off. The entire team was lost in this fiery plane crash in the hills of Huntington, West Virginia. Red Dawson was his name, Red Dawson. And I convinced him to speak for the first time ever. It was a big deal. It actually inspired them to go on and do the movie We Are Marshall. I went and did the interview with him. I interviewed Chad Pennington, Randy Moss, you name it. And then a reporter came and sat down in the chair. I asked questions over her shoulder. I wrote the script. She voiced it over and she reported it. And the story was reported by. I never got over it. It was heartbreaking. So I said, I have a voice here. I have a story to tell. And damn it, I'm going to do it myself. I knew that I didn't have a chance for a break yet. And so when I got the opportunity to go to Real Sports, which was the best job I ever had, hands down, I took it. I had so much pride working for Bryant Gumbel and for Ross Greenberg and the entire staff there. It was so thrilling. You walk into a room and you're with Real Sports. You just felt like it's like 60 Minutes. Like the pride you took because you knew you were going to do the best job possible. The shows were perfect. Every time you had to present your story to Ross Greenberg, you had to give a reason for every cut, every edit. It was very thrilling. I traveled Europe with Frank DeFore doing a piece on the San Antonio.
Throughout the season, you've got to tell that story. At some point this season, you've got to tell the story about traveling Europe, covering the IOC and all of that with Frank DeFord and his, tweed, his jackets and pocket squares and 5-star hotels. And you got to tell those stories throughout the season.
He also insisted on a Bentley driven chauffeur in London, which not bad. We went to fabulous dinners and drank gorgeous bottles of wine. and it was, but it was the interview. It was the piece on John McEnroe that actually got me going. I had pitched an idea. Let's profile John McEnroe, the man, the legend, the art collector, the critic, you name it. And it was me, and it was Jim Lampley. And I could tell from the first second we got in the room that Lamps and McEnroe were two giant egos that were clashing. And they just didn't like each other. Like, you could see it. Like, you know how John hides his feelings so well? You could sense the he just didn't like him, and you could sense it in the interviews. So I thought I'll just leave Lamps at home for the rest of the interviews. Flew to Florida to go interview him. He was doing the senior tour at the time, and we were doing an interview after one of the matches. He looks at me and goes, "What's your problem?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, what's wrong with you?" And you can hear that tone of John saying, "What's wrong with you? You ask better questions than Jim Lampley. Why aren't you on the air? You're a girl. You're smart. You're cute." Thank you, John. And he said, "Let's do an interview right now." He's like, "Turn around. Ask me questions. Shoot her first." John McEnroe is responsible for my on-air career. There, I said it. Every time he sees me, he says, "You owe me 10%. I say, "I didn't make that much." And so basically, whenever I'd see him in a Lakers game, he'd say, "You owe me 10%. You owe me 10%. He used to say that to you all the time. You know, your wife's on the air because of me. And he's not wrong, because he made my resume reel. I then went and borrowed a camera, shot my resume reel at Yankee Stadium because I was friends with him, having covered the team for so many years, and went across to the park across the street, made a couple stand-ups there. Steve Burton, my friend from WBZ in Boston, let me borrow his. Did a couple stand-ups after a Patriots game. Willie McGinnis still remembers me as a kid working for Dan Shaughnessy, like getting questions with him and Chris Slade when they were the linebacking core. I cut a couple corners, I'm not going to lie. It was like, who's the old coach who tried to get the job at Notre Dame and then lied on his resume and got tossed out? I mean, there were a couple, like, sure, I've got tons of on-air experience, which was the line that I used when I got my first job on the air with Fox Sports Net. I came out here doing a feature on Kobe Bryant. James Brown was my host, and they were launching Fox Sports Net. I said, "You know what? That sounds like a great idea." And I was doing the Kobe thing. I made it. I cold called, said, I'm a producer, reporter with Real Sports, and I'd love to talk to you about this Fox Sports Net thing you're launching. And Milt Weiss was the gentleman who was running at the time. I said to him, "I've got tons of on-air experience, but I'm really working on my producing skills at Real Sports." He said, "Okay, you're hired."
You know what? And I just remember throughout this entire process, I'm there at Sports Center, right? And sitting up there in Central Connecticut, living my life, still staying in touch with that producer who I met, who I wanted to date from the first minute I met her in the newsroom. And she just still wanted to be friends with me. Hold on a minute. Let me tell my story. Let me tell my story. It's my turn to tell a story. So I wanted to, you know, be more than just friends with her. And then, you know, after 2-3 years of that, we finally did start to date. At that very moment, that's when she says to me, you know, I've always wanted to be on air on television. I got a job in Los Angeles. What? What? And I'm like, "You're going to move to Los Angeles to do what? You're going to anchor the Southern California Sports Report for this new regional sports network out in Los Angeles for Fox Sports? You're going to do what?" And that's what you did.
3 years of being best friends.
I remember that we were in Central Park walking your mom's, you know, golden retriever at the time, Teddy. Now this is a much more smaller dog that we hear sometimes in the background of this conversation. I remember that.
Theodore Williams,
but I do
dog,
know
yes.
that was what you always wanted to do, and that's what this podcast is about, and that's what makes you a perfect host for it, is that what you just told it's like a lunar landing, you know, it's like a moonshot, like to do that, to be told by a legendary tennis player, "Why aren't you doing this thing?" And then you taking that to heart on top of you having an experience where you didn't get to do something on the air and wanting to do it yourself, and you did it yourself, except for the on-air part, and you made it happen, albeit in a very seemingly underhanded way, to be very honest. But whatever you got on the air, and then you were here in Los Angeles for easily the greatest sports era, of modern times in this town, where obviously Showtime Lakers and, you've got the Dodgers of the 80s at the same time, but you covered it all.
We have the LA Rams championship. Yep. Yeah. So what was so cool about it was, and then this is what I will say for all of you who are afraid or doubting yourself. I was so nervous about being found out that my first piece for the Southern California Sports Report on Fox Sports Net was a piece on the Anaheim Angels. I was so nervous I didn't shoot a stand-up, but I just was hoping that they wouldn't notice, because I really didn't have I could do it, but I was so nervous. I said, I don't want to be, I'm not selfish. I don't have to be on camera all the time. It was because I was too nervous. They said, no, you need to shoot a stand-up.
For those who don't know, that's you just standing on camera, shooting like finishing up the report, or in the middle of it, you're just standing there on camera, continuing your reporting or wrapping it up for the regional California Sports Report.
I had to drive to the Rancho Park golf course and make it look like Anaheim and stand there like a
Nothing looks like Anaheim there. Nothing. I don't know what.
Here's the grass. I'm like, all right, for the regional Southern California Sports Report, I'm Suzy Shuster from Anaheim.
That doesn't work. Yeah. Well, I just remember again, I'm doing Sports Center, and it's 2:40 in the morning. I'm sitting there on the set. Stuart Scott's to my right, and we have all the television sets from around the country, sporting events around the country, and Shaq and Kobe finish wiping the floor with the Trailblazers or something. And I look up, and there you are doing something, or you're on the set of your show, and Stuart would be like nudging me, like, look who that is. I'm like, yeah, I know, or the when the Angels won the World Series, or Pete Carroll, took over. You were there when Paul Hackett, whose son is now the head coach of the Denver Broncos, you were there when Paul Hackett took over. Handed things over he got bounced, and they hired somebody from outside the program named Pete Carroll, and my God, you had like a horseshoe.
There was a nice kid named Carson Palmer, who was the quarterback of the USC Trojans, and Hackett's playbook was the old Jets playbook. It was so thick, and Carson was so befuddled he just couldn't handle it. And so Pete Carroll came in, he threw everything out, he simplified things down for Carson Palmer so that he understood them, and rebuilt his confidence, because Carson was a kid from Southern California who's from one of those Rancho Santa something or others. And he basically had lost all of his confidence during the Hackett years. Really he was a shell of himself. And Pete Carroll, like I said, expunged everything Hackett related and rebuilt the Trojan program top and narrow. It was the running backs coach, and he had Reggie Bush on one side, Blendell White on the other. And he had an outstanding group of linemen, and they gave him confidence, and the plays became simplified. And I'd known Pete for 5 seconds in New England. So when I saw him, I said, hey, remember me? He's like, oh my God, how are you? He was so fantastic. He gave me inside track. I worked really hard, but it was nice having that connection. And as for the Angels, the year they won the World Series, they started 6-14. And there's nothing like being with a team for when they're terrible that lets you elevate to a certain place when they're great. Because I knew every night I'd go into Mike Scioscia's office. I'm like, all right, Skip, I got to do this interview. I know. All right. In 3, 2, and 1. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Here I am with Mike Soja and Mike. A heartbreaking loss last night tonight to the Diamondbacks, 7-1. What happened in the third inning that lost your steam? I mean, you make up whatever it is. You sound like and every night it was a losing interview. And then suddenly things changed, Then Frankie Rodriguez came in. Troy Percival started crushing it as their closer. Frankie was probably 75 years old at the time. They thought he was about 17. And I'll never forget, it was Scott Spezio, Tim Salmon, Troy Lost.
That's the first time in any season of Just Getting Started that name's been mentioned. I have not heard that name in forever.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember Darren Erstad, like he was you were like one of the few people he actually liked, like he was a tough guy, that guy.
Yeah. That's still for debate. I mean, he would never ever talk to me. And just really stern. And then one day I'm sitting in Dodger Stadium for a freeway series, and I'm writing my notes, and somebody kicks my chair. I look up, it's Darren. He says, "You didn't tell me that Rich Eisen was your boyfriend." He said, "You never asked."
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm misconstruing Darren Erstad with Barry Bonds. You were the only person Barry would talk to, and still to this very day.
Right.
And I think that's what everyone's going to figure out here on this pod is that Suzy's, your Rolodex is deeper than mine. And that's what's pretty cool. So, the guest list is going to be diverse, and it's going to be terrific, and the same pod is going to unfold, and I am so happy that you are doing this. So why don't you come across the hall, take the chair, and tell everyone who your guests or booked guests are going to be. Here's what I'll do is I'll tap dance. She's going to let the dogs in first. My God. You'd see right here as she's letting the dogs in. These dogs follow her everywhere. The latest example of what a great heart she has. If dogs follow you everywhere. Oh boy, wait a minute. I think I locked the door. Hold on a minute. Hold on. That's not a metaphor for anything.
So let me just tell you who's coming up, because I'm excited to share this with you. And like I said earlier, I'm restarting too. I stopped working on the air full time when I had our 3 kids. And I found it really hard to go back full time because Rich works like a dog, 17 jobs or so. And it's very hard to be a mom and also have a husband who works all the time and actually raise 3 kids. So I stopped working on the air full time. I just started going back to work, but I started a production company because I needed something to do, but I had to reinvent too. I had to find something new to do. I had to just get started with my company. And I know how hard that is and how daunting it is. And oftentimes I'd say, like the frozen caveman lawyer, like, I don't understand your world. I'm not from your world of make-believe television. And it's daunting. It's hard. And that was why when Rich and Westwood One asked me if I wanted to do this, I said, absolutely, because I know just how hard it can be to just get started. So I thought for the first season, that I'd mix it up a bit, much like Rich did. Try to bring you people I thought were diverse and different and maybe interesting. And that's why I started off with Jeffrey Ross, the comedian, because I love him so much, because I think he's hysterical, because he's foul and filthy and yet the kindest human being in the world, the Roastmaster General. And we both lost our friend Bob Saget recently. And I thought it would be cathartic for both of us to talk that through with you guys, share our thoughts on Bob, but also ask Jeffrey, how did he get started? And you'd be amazed he was not planning on being a comedian. But he had balls, and he took some risks, and I think has become one of the preeminent comedians there is. He just got back from a trip to Paris with Chris Rock and with Dave Chappelle. I luckily told him where to go, Angelina, for one of the best sandwiches and hot chocolate in all of Paris. But he's going to be our first guest on Just Getting Started here on Westwood One, and we are thrilled to have him. He'll be followed up by Nick Mohammed, who is from one of our favorite shows. I think it's fair to say probably yours as well, Ted Lasso. And he's going to be one of the most important characters in this upcoming season. Obviously, we saw him. He's the clubhouse. He was originally just the towel guy, right? And he made his way up and became the coach who got angry and stormed off and dyed his hair gray, and now is the manager of the opposing team, Hannah Waddington's husband's team. And we'll see him. We'll talk to him about how he got started. Stephen A. Smith is guest number 3. He was my old friend. I knew Stephen A. Smith when he was just Stephen Smith. And when he was just getting started, he was at Fox Sports, and he had a take and a voice and thoughts and opinions. He came from the world of writing, and we've been friends ever since. And I love watching his meteoric rise. He may be the most important person in media right now. So he'll be guest number 3, followed by Michael Irvin, who's guest number 4, who's my friend before Rich's. There, I said it. Michael was at our wedding in a 10-piece blue suit. He stuck out. It was fabulous. I was thrilled to have him on my side of the aisle. And then, we've got a bunch of other asks out. I have a bunch of actors. I'm making Paul Rudd do it. Sorry, Paul, do you know that you're doing it? Making a couple other friends of ours who are big-time actors and actresses do it because I think they have great stories. And I want this to be inspirational. Life is really hard right now. And it takes a lot of balls to try something new or to get going at all. So I'm hoping that we have something inspirational and fun. I'm hoping that you'll laugh. I was amazed at how dark things got in our first episode. I think that will be important for everyone to hear as well, because things aren't always perfect and life is not always perfect. And sometimes you just need a little push, just a little bit of help, someone to reach out their hand and pull you along, or to push you from behind and say, you can do this. And I'm hoping that's what you're going to get from Just Getting Started. So with that, I will sign off as the host of Just Getting Started. I'm thrilled that you guys are all listening to this today. I also want to say, I would hope that you'll reach out and tell me who you want to hear from. And if you have thoughts and comments, if they're nasty, I will ignore them. I have thick skin from doing this for a long time. Not that thick. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have questions, if you know someone's coming up, ping me questions. I'll ask them and throw your name out there and give you the credit that you deserve for coming up with them. But I'm looking forward to being with you and to growing this alongside with you. So with that, I'll say thanks and talk to you at the next episode.